Welcome to part 2 of the amortization tutorial, and we're going to be going over the ponder-proof questions 1 through 5. There's lots of different ways to calculate these, but I'm going to show probably the most concise way. You'll notice if you watched the first tutorial, I've changed my numbers back to the original, and as you're filling this out, again, you can use my template and these numbers to make sure that you've typed everything in absolutely perfectly, as long as you don't forget to change these and personalize it. And if you make cell references for these 3 or 5 questions, then they'll change with you and it'll be to your benefit that way. The first question you'll find in your PDF, the whole question. I've just given you a little prompt over here. We want to find the month in which you reach half of the original balance using the original scenario. So I have 2 ways of doing this. I can actually calculate it, which is good. I want to calculate it, but I'm also going to check it, and some people are doing this by hand, and it's actually okay, but I'd rather just have it all typed out all at once. So we want to know the month that it reaches half of its original balance. Well, Microsoft Excel has some functions, and one of those talks about months. Do you remember which one? That's right, n per. That's the number of periods. And since I'm going to be referencing things, I'm going to come over here for my rate divided by 12, comma, my payment, just cell reference that again because everything's going to be cell referenced. It'll change when I make my project personalized. The present value is my loan amount, and I can go ahead and do the future value, which will be half of the original balance. Now remember, n per, if you watch the first tutorial, comes out negative. So I'm going to come in here into my payment and make this negative so that my number of periods comes out to be a positive number. But I also need to make my future value negative here. And this is half of the original balance, so I'm going to type in 0.5 because I want it to be half, and 0.5 is half of, which is times, the loan amount. And that'll give me the number of periods for my future value to be half of the original, and I typed in or cell referenced everything else, and it looks good. I don't have to have a type. I could go ahead and put comma 0. You don't have to. There we go. Now this says that it's month 251. To double check that, I'm going to come over here and press equals 0.5 times the loan amount. I want to go find what month gives me $86,750. So I'm going to scroll down through here and just double check that I did it right. 8675. 86, not out of the hundreds, 86. Oh, there we go, 8675. There we go, it's right in between these two. There we go, 8675. Should be about 251. There we go, 251.8. That's perfect. Now let's move to the next one. The interest you save for a 20-year mortgage instead of the 30-year mortgage. Now, I taught you a quick way of finding interest. QME payment. I could go ahead and do this the long way, which I have done before, and some of you might want to think about it that way. That's fine, but I'm going to do it the quick way, which uses the actual built-in function. So I'm going to equals QME payment, because our CMU, press tab and it'll bring it up, because it'll total all of the interest. It just does everything that we did here all in just one nice little package. Now I need to cell reference the rate. Again, it doesn't prompt you. You need to know you divide it by n, comma, number of periods. Now I am going to be saving myself 10 years by doing a 20-year mortgage. So I'm going to do 12 times 20. The present value is the loan amount. The start period, it starts on the first month and it ends on the last month, which is 12 times 20. And this one I do need to type, so I'm going to put in a 0. Now this is the interest that I will be accumulating for the 20 years. And this will calculate negatively, and I'm going to press equals because I need to make that bigger. QME payment calculates negatively, but that was how much I accumulated for the 20-year mortgage, right? I didn't give me the interest saved. So I need to take the interest from the original and subtract the second, or the QME payment. But wait, remember how this calculated negatively? So I'm really going to add because it's a negative number. And I should get $76,157. So if I were to have financed for a 20-year mortgage instead of a 30-year, I would save $76,000 in interest. All right, the next one is again an interest. In fact, these 3, 2, 3, and 4 are all talking about the interest saved, which means you can use the QME payment formula. So the interest saved here, so I know I'm going to be doing QME payment, and remember, this calculates negatively, so you kind of have to think about it backwards. We want to find how much interest you will save if you were to have financed with an APR of just 1% less. So I'm going to go ahead and find the QME payment of the 1% less, and then go back and subtract like we did in the previous example, just so that you remember that it's negative, and when I add, that's why I'm adding instead of subtracting, which kind of gets confusing. So we're just going to find the interest that we pay with the 1% less first. So one step at a time, QME payment, the rate. Again, cell reference, don't type it in because you're going to change that for your personal project. And you need to divide it by 12. It doesn't prompt you, but you need to divide it by n. Number of periods, it's not going to change, so 12 times 30 years. The next is present value, my loan amount. The start period is 1. The end period is 360. The type is 0, and I just realized we forgot to subtract 1, the whole point of the problem. But I want to put this in parentheses so that the order of operations will subtract the 1 before it divides. So I'm going to put a parenthesis by my APR, subtract 0.01 because it's a percent, close the parenthesis, and of course that's all being divided by 12. And this is how much you are going to be spending in interest with 1% less. It looks pretty reasonable. With 1% more, you spent $200,000 in interest. With 1% less, it costs you $161,000. Now again, we want to subtract this minus the total interest with 1% less. But again, that calculates negatively, so we're really going to add because it's already negative so that it subtracts. There we go. Now, as you're going through, you can use my numbers as a reference. These are correct. If you didn't get $39,180 in your cell, go check and see, did you put parentheses around your APR, subtract 1%, 0.01? Did you divide by 12? And it's 12 times 30. It's looking pretty good. Now let's move on to the number 4. The interest saved if you were to have paid 10% down instead of the 5% down from the original scenario. Because I'm talking about interest saved, again, I'm going to put equals. And in this case, we can go ahead and do my interest because now you're familiar with what we were doing. And I'm going to add the QME payment because it calculates negatively, and fill in what it would be if I were to have spent 10% down instead of the 5% down, and that'll show us how much money that we saved by just spending a little bit more. Okay, this one, the APR stayed the same because it didn't say anything about APR changing like the previous problem. So APR, don't forget, divide by n or 12, comma, number of periods. That didn't change. This one was just a number or the down payment, so it's 12 times 30, or you could type in 360 in this one because we aren't going to uh, pull and drag it down like we did the other ones, click and drag. Now the present value is going to change on this one because I want to spend 10% down, which would change my loan amount. So I'm going to go through and calculate the loan amount for the 10% all in this little area. If you wanted to calculate it off to the side over here, you could do that and then just reference that cell. And that's up to you. There's so many versatile ways that you could do this. But I'm going to go ahead and calculate my new loan amount of 10% in here. So I'm going to take my house price and subtract 10% of the house price. So 0.1 times the house price. Now that's exactly how we found the down, right here. We did 0.05 for 5%, and that's how we got this. Then you subtract it from this original, but don't forget, we had the closing costs. So I do need to add my closing costs in here. Now, comma, the starting period is on month 1. The ending period will be at the end of 360, or you could do like we did over here, which was 12 times the number of years. It doesn't matter in this case because this will always be a 30-year loan on our original scenario. And then the type will be at the beginning of the month or 0. Shift, close parenthesis, and I think everything's good to go. Press enter and it will save you $10,425.44. All right, now the last one. The extra amount that you need to pay to save yourself 10 years on the loan. So this one I'm not going to use a QME payment because that was total interest. This one is extra amount. That sounds like a payment formula, which is exactly what we need. How much more do you need to pay to save 10 years? So I want to find a new payment and then I'll subtract my old payment and that's how much more I'll have to spend. So I again will reference my rate, divide by 12, number of periods. Now remember, I want to save 10 years. Saving 10 years out of 30 will be 20 years. I could type in 20 or 12 times 20, or I could type in 12 times this cell minus 10 years. It's up to you. In this case, I'm going to just type in 12 times 20 years because that saves me 10 years, comma. The present value, we're not going off of the interest saved on number 4. We're just going back to the original scenario. So my loan is again $173,000. The future value we don't need to type in. So in fact, I'm just going to close that and press enter so that you can kind of see what's going on. So here, my payment's coming out negative, so I'm going to put a negative in there. My new payment goes up by a little bit. Notice how it's $1,243. Over here, for the 30-year loan, it was $1,040. And I want to know how much more I need to pay to get to that. So I'm going to subtract my original payment. There we go. You should be paying about $202 more every single month, and you'll save 10 years off of a 30-year loan. All right, that just about wraps everything up. If you have questions, go ahead and email me or pause and rewind the tutorials to finish up. And good luck on your amortization template, and have fun house shopping.